And there is often a discussion between, let's say, Neo-Advaita traditions. They just keep as a spiritual practice the transcendence of the I into nothing. And I think it's a very valid practice, but I believe it's not enough. Because true non-duality, I believe, is mastering silence and movement. True non-duality is that we rest in the unformed, but we are fully moving. So we rest in the unformed, we know who we are before we existed, and we are fully expressing our incarnation until it returns into nothing without leaving a trace. So one of the profound spiritual practices is to see how do we leave a moment without a trace? How do you fully experience the moment without leaving a leftover in our heart space or in our being? So you know situations that you experience, but you don't experience them fully, and then you walk on the street and then you think quite a long time about this situation. So it bothers us for a longer time after, but the situation is already over. Which means there's a leftover, there's an unfulfilled energy that is circling within us. And why I'm talking about this, because if we talk about a healthy container for a spiritual practice, we also need to talk about shadow parts. We also need to talk about our shadow work, because the shadow somehow prohibits the creation of a strong container that can go into transcendental areas without collapsing constantly, again and again. So if we talk about shadows, if you want to understand shadows, we need to understand how intelligence moves. And if I know that you are a movement that has already started somewhere, and your spiritual practice is to find out what set you in movement. So if I know this, then I know the most effective kind of therapy or the most effective kind of shadow work is to look where suffering, so to speak, the friction of the movement, the in vain attempt to stop the universe. A shadow part is the in vain attempt to stop the movement of the universe. And suffering in life, I believe, is just the friction with the core movement of the universe. So if I know this, then I see that the restoration of this movement is actually very healing at the first place, and secondly, it always sets free a certain creative potential. So with other words, in every shadow area, there is a unique intelligence that wants to continue its movement so that it can return into nothing without leaving a past. Because as long as it has a past, it's not fulfilled. There is nothing leaves a past when it's fulfilled, because if it's fulfilled, it returns into nothing and it disappears. So the past actually is just unfulfilled energy that is waiting to return into nothing. Once it returns into nothing, it's totally fulfilled. There is no trace. It doesn't leave a shadow. It disappears. So how can we create together a community of practitioners that is radical enough to look at the movement and is courageous enough to transcend itself into nothing? Both, I believe, is needed in order to have a non-dual practice.